So now that we're in the Miami Heat conversation, let's bring on one of the absolute studs here from Five on the Floor and the Five Reasons Sports Network. I've spoken to this gentleman before. I've had the pleasure, but not yet on this show. This is his Donno Daily debut. Greg Sylvander is on with us now here on Five Reasons. Good afternoon, Greg. How are you, sir? And bro, tell Ethan to send Sean Stanley and I and Manny Chang one of those hats. I've been trying to track down the Five Reasons Sports hat. It'd be easier to buy a PlayStation 5 at this point.
This is true. You are not alone. There's probably like a dozen of us in the network. I hounded Ethan over and over again, and only because we do Five on the Floor so frequently do I think I pecked at him enough that he got one in the mail to me. So that's the formula. You got to just keep pecking at him.
Totally. I'm going to keep doing that. So first thing, I don't know what camp you fall into, Greg, because Udonis Haslem is surprisingly polarizing among Heat fans. I mean, people seem to think that 15th spot on the roster could be used on an all-star player or something. And I do think that there is a semi-legitimate concern, over these past, last year and this year with COVID, maybe the 15th spot on the roster is more needed than it is in the past. So do you have any issue with UD coming back for a 19th season, even though we only expect to see him probably 5 minutes all year?
So, and it's funny you call it polarizing, because the day that Udonis Haslem becomes polarizing in Miami is truly bizarre, but we've arrived there. So there's a couple things. I would say philosophically and almost to a degree spiritually, I have no problem with Udonis Haslem being back. I have been one of the more vocal people on social media platforms such as Twitter saying that UD has a roster spot as long as we go. And if they poll the entire locker room and they poll the coaching staff and they poll all the executives in the front office and the consensus is that UD is welcomed back, who the heck are any of us to like poke holes in that when the actual professionals that are being paid to play with and coach and work with Udonis Haslem want him back, right? So like ultimately UD has a blank check as far as the roster spot to me. They're paying him back for all those haircuts he took to keep the big three and so on and so forth. Where I do think this does become functionally polarizing is you have a situation where Oladipo is not going to be back until at the best Christmas, right?
Right.
You have KZ Okpala, who hasn't looked great in summer league, and we don't know if we can rely on him at all. And then you've really got a cast of characters beyond that are unproven. So at some point, I guess you have to ask yourself, in a COVID season, can you really functionally operate with three of your roster spots being players that can't or won't play? And I think that's the dilemma that's made this UD thing even more polarizing this season.
Wow. By the way, I love this comment from Julian Ramos. UD is re-signing like he has bad debt or something. I mean, but to be honest, though, they would give that guy any job he wanted, Greg. I mean, it's not like he needs the $2.6 million to be on the roster. They would probably happily pay him $2.6 million for either a front office job or a coaching job. So he's getting that money from Mickey one way or another.
It's true. Which means that the players are likely campaigning for him to remain. Like if you think if Jimmy and Bam walked into that office and said, listen, we need that spot. UD, it's not working. You think that they would fly in the face of what those guys want to do? No. So to me, that is the tell right there that the players are bought into UD being back. So again, who are we as onlookers to say anything different?
I can't exactly explain why I've been a lot more into Summer League this year than I usually am. Like I usually very casually follow Summer League, but I've been watching these games. I think part of it just has to do with the enthusiasm of the Five Reasons staff. Like I noticed like the post-game stream that you guys were doing on the network had like over 300 people watching live, like at any point, which is pretty incredible for Summer League because I didn't used to care about Summer League, but I've been entertained, man. I mean, Max Strus was on something last night. He was incredible. I mean, not only, did he hit the game winner in the sudden death second overtime. I love sudden death double OT.
Isn't that fun?
It really is fun. But he put up big numbers throughout the game. And every stretch of that game I watched, Max Strus was doing something incredible. So let's talk about him first before we get to the Turkish Moses Malone. Max Strus, do you expect him to be heavily featured in the rotation this year? Has he earned that?
I think yes. I think he will be the primary wing off the bench, although I think most of us conceptualize him as a guard. I think that he'll play some at the three. They'll do some three guard lineup stuff, and he's going to get his shot at being one of the primary reserves, I'd say in the top 9 to start the season. I don't know if he'll stay in that spot all year, but he's going to be given the opportunity. So he's the guy on the summer league roster right now that I think has the best shot of having an everyday spot on the actual team for sure.
Right, and I think that's kind of a good segue into Yurtseven, who obviously it's a little bit more crowded right now in the power rotation. Udonis Haslem notwithstanding, who's not really in the rotation. But what sort of a role do you envision for Yurtseven, and what have you made of his development so far? Because I've been really impressed watching him.
It's funny. They signed him at the end of last season and no one had even heard of him. Like even us who get info, like Ethan and I are texting like, who is this guy? Like no one knew where he was coming from. At least like Kendrick Nunn, we had heard of. He was with Golden State, or like these other guys that they've brought in on the last days of seasons that all of a sudden turn out to be players. This could be another one of those. And I think from an organization perspective, from a fan perspective, the hope is that Yurtseven could eventually become a player that could play next to Bam. So that's like the ideal scenario, is we're looking for this unicorn big man that has enough of a stretch game, but enough of not being a defensive liability to be next to Bam. So that's ideal. Otherwise, I think that just having another young big in the pipeline is something that's been missing. They haven't really fed that as much. So with Precious Achiuwa heading to Toronto, I think it's good to get another big man in the pipeline. And he's looked good so far. I mean, dominant at times in summer league. So I think he also will get a shot at making an impression, but I don't know that he will be like a rotational piece for the entire season.
I love watching the Heat develop players like this. And admittedly, when it comes to this stuff, summer league, player development, I definitely live in a Miami Heat bubble. So I know the Heat are really good at this, Greg, but are they better at this than most organizations when it comes to finding guys like Strus and like Yurtseven and developing them into serviceable rotational players who can either help the Heat in the long term or become trade pieces to help the Heat in the long term?
It's a great question. I've had debates with some of the more analytic minded folks that we converse with, whether in the network or on different shows, because there's nothing really in the data, if you look at historical data related to draft picks and undrafted players, that says that Miami necessarily hits on guys more than everyone else does. Like just straight up, if you look at raw data sets, right? But if you just think about it, the fact that they can stay relevant, they're never a team that spends a decade in mediocrity. Like that just doesn't happen. But yet they don't focus on the draft at the same level that other organizations do. I think it speaks to their comfortability in like relying on this undrafted route, right? Like they literally have a summer league roster where no one has been drafted on the whole damn team. Like no one. Right. Well, KZ was drafted in the second round, excuse me, but everyone else is undrafted. So they feel like they can develop a guy who maybe is on the fringe of being drafted and turn them into a functional piece. And I don't know that every other team has the confidence level in their developmental staff to go that route, punt on as many drafts as the Heat punt on. So overall, I would say that their philosophy is that yes, they do hit on more of them. And there's so many stories, whether it's from Bruce Bowen to UD to Duncan Robinson to Max Strus. So, I mean, we have lots of examples too.
We're joined here by Greg Sylvander here on Donno Daily. Greg, of course, you can see and hear on 5 on the Floor. Does an awesome job here across the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Before we talk about some of the acquisitions the Heat have made here in the summer, let's talk about, outgoings. I mean, I'm definitely going to miss Goran Dragic, but the Heat, they upgraded with Kyle Lowry. I make no mistake about that. But I'm wondering for guys like Kendrick Nunn and even for Precious Achiuwa, who do you think is going to give Heat fans the most regret, if any? Maybe we'll have no regrets, because obviously Jay Crowder last year, losing him gave us some regrets. So is there going to be one that got away this year, you think?
Long term, no. I think by the end of the season, we won't be harping on anyone that was let go. I don't think. I've been proven wrong before. But I think initially to start the season, until Oladipo is back, this is my qualifier. until Oladipo is back, I think that there could be some flinch moments from Heat fans when they don't have an offensive player like Kendrick Nunn that could come off the bench, spell the starters, be able to score in bunches. Like that's something that I don't think we know if we have off the bench right now that could have easily been retained for, $4.5 million or so. So I think if there's one guy that got away, it's Kendrick Nunn because of the value related to his productivity. But by the end of the year, if Oladipo rounds into form and Max Strus is playing a pivotal role as a wing guard type player, I don't think we'll be harping on this long term. No.
So as far as acquisitions go, and we can even include Dwayne Dedman. I know it was a reacquisition, but I wasn't so sure if I was expecting him back, and I was thrilled, right? But from Kyle Lowry to PJ Tucker to Markieff Morris, how do you feel about the business Miami has done so far?
I like it. The roster's grown on me. So initially my first thought was Lowry and PJ Tucker is not enough. Like they need more. And I think that I probably still subscribe to that to some degree. I feel like there's still a move away from really being able to like confidently with your chest say like, bring any team on, let's do this. Although they probably say that now. I like what they did because I think that they recognized that they were missing some of the toughness and the veteran, like the team like looks a little older now, but they've got proven guys that have been in the trenches of playoff runs, finals runs. If you notice, all of the guys they signed have won championships recently, whether it be Lowry, PJ Tucker, Markieff Morris. So they're getting guys with that pedigree that have been through those trenches. So personally, I like the acquisitions. I think PJ Tucker is going to become endeared by the fan base and loved in a way where he may never leave again. He's that type of Heat culture type of player. So I think he's going to fit in seamlessly. And the flexibility of this roster, the ability to play in so many different ways, I think has been we haven't talked about it enough. And I think only until we see the team on the floor will we really see how that manifests itself, on the court.
So Goran Dragic, we've talked a lot about him in the last week. I'm going to miss him, even though, again, Lowry, I think, can help this team more than Dragic. But, Dragic, he's going to go down as one of my, one of my favorite Heat players of all time, maybe like a top 20 type guy. I'm not going to say top 10, top 5. But do you think, will Dragic ever get a jersey retirement? Will his jersey ever be hanging in the rafters?
My gut feeling says yes. I know that Sentimental Pat is not always around, but when it comes to jersey retirement, Sentimental Pat comes often. And that's even to the extent of Dan Marino and Michael Jordan having their jerseys hung in that stadium. So I think that eventually they will come back to that, just as they will with number 6. And I think that he will get his number retired. I feel like the bubble run, getting to the finals, everything he did there, the way that he connected with Jimmy, just all of that, and just his tenure in Miami, sticking around through some tough seasons that didn't work the way they thought. I think his number will eventually be hanging in the rafters. And I love Goran Dragic. I mean, I'll tell you, after the run last year, right prior to the finals, I said that he had surpassed Timmy Hardaway as the greatest point guard in Miami Heat history. It takes a lot for me to say that. Literally, yeah. I grew up idolizing Timmy Hardaway.
Same here, man.
That's where I'm at with Goran. He's a lifer.
Awesome stuff here, and I enjoy the insight from Greg Sylvander. You want to make sure you follow him on Twitter. It's literally just his name. He's cool like me, just the name, at Greg Sylvander. And Greg, when's the next time we can see you or hear you on the 5 Reasons Sports Network if you want to promote anything?
Yeah, so we'll be recording 5 on the Floor. We're actually going to likely take a quick breather for the next 2 or 3 days, but we'll be back full-fledged next week. So Monday morning, your drives to work, you'll have 5 on the Floor wherever you can find podcasts. And if any news pops up, you may see a surprise podcast or stream, because you know how that goes. But essentially, follow 5 Reasons Sports Network, and you'll find me wherever the Miami Heat are located.
I love it. Good stuff, Greg. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff there from Greg Sylvander.